Hey everyone, and welcome to our first Instructor Community Call of January, of the year, I should say, which is in January. So welcome to 2023. My name is, as always, is Kyle Rosenthal, and we'll introduce a special guest shortly as to who we have. You might see some familiar faces from previous calls, so Kristen and Ashley from our team, and then Nathan is also joining. For those that are listening to the recording, thank you very much for taking the time. For those that are joining us live, thank you for taking the time as well. We really appreciate it. If you do get a chance to join us live, it obviously gives you a chance to be able to ask us some questions. Particularly if there's a guest that's in who you think, hey, that would be a great thing to be able to ask some questions directly of, then please join us and for our future calls. So quick look at the agenda for today. Before we get to the agenda, the post one thing about that you hope to gain today and you could win. So for those that are joining us live, or even if you are listening to the recording, then jump on to social media, mention that you're attending the call or listening to the call, and then tag us either on our Twitter, our LinkedIn, Facebook, or on Instagram. We'd appreciate the shout out, and you never know, the prize might be coming your way. All right, so today's agenda. So welcome, which is where we are now. So and again, thank you for taking the time. Hopefully, as we look forward to 2023, it's going to be a successful year for everyone, and a year full of learning. And that's us learning from you, and also your students learning from you, and you also as the instructors learning from everyone else as well. So making sure that you're kind of putting yourself forward and taking opportunities to be able to widen your knowledge base as well. We're then going to roll into a fireside chat with Nathan Bigler-McCorkell. Nathan is one of our program managers. So we have an interesting conversation with him around some of the mock onboarding and that sort of thing, which is a big part of what a lot of our instructors do, obviously, but it also gives you a bit of an insight into some of our processes so that you can kind of see where we're kind of at and what we do to be able to get content in front of you. Then we'll have a bit of a review of the instructor offers that we have on board, just to make sure that you are aware of those, and then conversations and questions that'll come at the end of that as well. So last time, that became a quite an interesting part of the session, where we had some lively conversations. So I'm looking forward to that. If there's any questions or comments that people have. All right, so without any further ado, let's move into Nathan. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me.
No problems at all. Now, in the words of Office Space, what is it you do here?
Well, as you said, I'm Nathan Bigler-McCorkell. I'm a program manager at Skillable. I've been with Skillable for a little more than 2 years, and I've been a program manager here for a little under 2 years. My main role and responsibility right now is maintaining our mock content, making sure that it's up to date, that it functions correctly in our environment, and it's ready for use by our learning partners to teach their students.
Okay, and so what attracted you to that role? Because it's a pretty hefty role, like to take on for the business, right?
It is, yeah. I started as a junior program manager for some of our smaller programs that consumed mocks. So I became very comfortable with it and very familiar with it. And then from there, the position opened up to sort of be the person to maintain that content. I sort of threw my hat in the ring, and I'm glad I did, because I really enjoy it. Mock it's always changing. It's always interesting. It's never a dull day when mock is involved, and I've really enjoyed it.
That's good. Like it is a challenge, because it's like I guess you've got to deal with you're getting hit by both sides of the fence from there. So I think there's changes that are coming from Microsoft, and there's also then the challenges that come in from the instructors around it as well. So I don't necessarily envy that envy your position. So I guess like to start off with what like, and one of the reasons why I asked you to come in, because I know that there is that process, right, of going from when we have like when Microsoft produce a lab, or when a lab is added into a course or a new course, and we might sort of attack it from two different points. We might do it from a new course perspective, and then an existing course perspective that maybe gets changed. And then obviously there's a process that goes from that happening on the Microsoft side of the fence that then leads all the way through to it actually then being in front of a student, or for an instructor to have access to it. So can you talk us through a little bit about like basically what that process is? Like what happens? Like, how does Skillable find out about the fact we've got a new course coming up? What's the like, and then what is that process on the way through?
Absolutely. So like with learning partners and with MCTs, we learn about new course releases through the title planner. We rely pretty heavily on that for update cadence, for changes that happen. So we monitor that, and then we monitor it with GitHub as well. But for new courses, essentially, we get that date. Typically, a little before that happens, depending on the course, Microsoft will send us files for the VM that's going to be running on this course, as well as the GitHub repository that hosts all the instructions. I will take that information, I will send it over to our development team. They will then import the VM into Skillable Studio, where we host all the information. They will optimize it so it works properly on our platform, do any tweaks that we know will make it a little bit better. They will then set up the instructional profile as well, and then they'll go in and they'll make some tweaks to that as well, depending on what's needed, to make sure it looks nice, that our IDLX reader is translating that markdown correctly, the images look properly, the numbering is working, the images are good. After that, and it's been run through, it's launching nicely, we know it's running, we send it over to a subject matter expert. We have a subject matter expert QA the lab for us end to end, make sure it works on our platform, make sure the steps work. We then take that feedback and we submit any content related issues we find to GitHub for the content owners to investigate and to look through. We make any changes on our end that are required if the VM is not behaving the way we think it should, or if the instructions aren't formatting properly. We take all of that, we fix it up. Once we get the final approval on everything, we publish it out to the learning partners for use.
And so on average, what would be that time frame? Like how long would that take from when, say for instance, we have a new course? Obviously, like if we know a course is coming up, we don't actually get access to it until the content's ready from that Microsoft side. So what's that sort of time frame look like from start to finish?
It's going to vary course to course a lot of the time, and what the setup is like. For faster courses, we try and keep it under about 2 weeks for the whole ordeal. From building it out on our system out to QA. If we find some bigger issues, if there's issues with the VM or with the content, it can take a little longer because we don't want to have something out there that's not working to our standard. So we do try and make sure but it takes a little longer to vet it properly and make sure we're happy with the end product.
Okay, and then. So if once a course is released, and obviously you'd be aware of this, and I know this from when we've done things at events and that sort of thing, is that once you have more than a small subset of eyes on a course or any content, there's things that will suddenly appear that were perfect before, and you go and someone will go, well, yeah, but this is wrong, and say, of course, okay. So is there a process then to be able to get that feedback, particularly with mock? Is there a process for that feedback, or does it go through GitHub? What's the process there?
So there's a couple of different avenues for feedback like this. We do rely heavily on GitHub. We try and monitor issues posted there and keep an eye on them. We're also posting issues ourselves when they come up, but a big kudos to our support team, where they will escalate. A ticket will come into them. They will vet it for either being a content issue or a platform issue. And then it will, depending on what kind of issue it is, get escalated correctly to one of our teams. We have a team referred to internally solutions and growth, and they are going to, vet the issues and either put in fixes in place or escalate it to GitHub or to myself. And then I can try and contact, depending on how massive the blocker is, to a content owner directly. And so I have to figure out how to get to them and get that information and sort of get it resolved quickly. Or we'll put in some alerts in place to try and, let learners know, hey, we know this is an issue and we're working on it, or we've, have this workaround that you can try.
Okay. And then, so what would, what's the preferred way for us to be, for Skillable to get that feedback from the instructors? Which way would you like? Like in an ideal world, if I was to say to an instructor, if there's something, if you see that there's an issue, this is what you should do. What would be that process?
Our preferred method is kind of the two-pronged, and unfortunately it's a little labor intensive for instructors, is that GitHub. And
Right.
that way it's visible to all other instructors so they know what's happening, and it lets other instructors know if there's workarounds in place, and it gets eyes on the content owner. But if there's major issues, or if you're unsure if it's a content issue and it could be our platform acting up, through our support is always great. And that way we get that feedback and we can sort of hopefully, make moves to fix it.
Great. And actually, just on that note of the GitHub, I remember, I think it was the meeting last month, or would have been in November, because we did do one in December, that there was actually, from an MCT perspective, and this is just a general statement, this isn't for you, Nathan, but this is just a general statement for any of the Microsoft certified trainers that are watching this, is that you do have that power to be able to go into GitHub and make corrections. And that was actually something that was a surprise to one of the instructors last time we came together, because they weren't aware of that power, that ability. So and I know as an instructor in the past, before the instructions and that sort of thing were being put into GitHub, there was frustration, just from a look, this is going back a while when things were paper based, etc. or even when we went to having the instructions hosted in Skill Pipe, it was there was frustration because there was no way to be able to to empower an instructor to be able to do that. But as an MCT, you are empowered to be able to go and make those changes. So if you see something, if you see that something's wrong, don't just shout at the screen, or say to your students, "Well, it was it's Microsoft's fault, or it's whatever." Go and do something about it. Make the change. If this and as Nathan said, that by doing that, you're not only going to make your life easier, but you're also going to then make life easier for other instructors, right? So because it may be, particularly if it's a new course, no one else may have seen it yet. There may be things that you're seeing. And of course, as as we move more into cloud-based labs and that thing, the speed of change is quite a lot, right? So there'll be things that will change that the content owner within Microsoft may not even notice, or may not be aware of, because there's been an adjustment made. I know personally, and this is going back a few years ago, I was doing an Office 365 course, and I had two people sitting next to each other, and their portal looked different. And that was because there was an update that was going through, but it hadn't hit all of Office 365 yet. And that's the same sort of thing that you may come across. Obviously, hopefully not that extreme, but as an instructor, you may come across that. So if you notice it, go and make the updates, make the changes. Okay, well, that's great. Thanks for that information, Nathan. That's it's good to know that we've got that instructors do have that two feedback loop sort of methods to be able to come through. So the other question then is, what happens if there's an update? If there is a change, and obviously if it's a change within GitHub, that's a pretty transparent change that comes through, right? Because we just feed that through. What about if there's a more material change to the course? If there's something that does require VM updates, or there's more of a major change, how does that get handled?
Yeah, so for VM updates, it's very similar to new course release. Essentially, we will get a packaged up version of the VM sent to us. We will have to import it. We'll have to make changes. Hopefully, we get it in time that we can get everything in place, that when the instructor pushes those changes to GitHub, that we are able to have the VM in place for those new instructions. If that doesn't happen, for about a week or so, we may have to version those instructions. So you're using that one version back, but we try and revert that as quick as we can. Once we put the VM in place, essentially we always try and do VM updates on a Friday night. Try and make sure we're not impacting classes, we're not making, not ruining anyone's week, making sure that the next class that starts on a Monday is ready to go with the latest and greatest material is always our goal for that. And like you said, with GitHub, it's all automatic. So as soon as the changes are made in GitHub, it is reflected in our lab environment. So, if for some reason a content makes a change on a Wednesday midday, if that student refreshes their instructions, they'll get the new instructions right away.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the other benefit of doing the change on a Friday is obviously it then crosses over to like that Friday is a weekend, like at the end of Friday is a weekend everywhere. So even if, say, for instance, you're in the Middle East, right? Friday and Saturday is still a weekend. So therefore, we're not pushing something that's going to be introducing issues into a class. So obviously we try and avoid doing that as much as possible to avoid having instructors to have to do that tap dance of change. So,
exactly. You don't want, learners losing all their progress midweek and having to start over. And
sure.
I'm always cognizant of the fact that, Sunday night, my time is Monday out, the start of class Monday for other places. So
yeah.
Always being ready to, be ready to adapt and be ready for that on a Friday is what's important for me.
And it's like I guess as a bigger picture for those that are that are listening to this after as well, is just bear in mind that sort of that you are like that yeah, we have classes running all the time. Like there's like and like as I said, like that Monday to Friday is not a Monday to Friday everywhere. So if you go into like other parts of the world, then that's Sunday is Sunday is Monday. So so it like we try to do changes with the least amount of impact, but there may be times when that can't be avoided or will impact like in a small way. So apologies in advance if that does happen. 21. Okay, great. Well, and then I guess the other so that's sort of like the beginning of life of a beginning of life, and also the maintenance of a lab. What about the other extreme? Because I know that, say, like Microsoft over the last couple of years, or particularly last year, have archived off they archived off a lot of courses, and that caused, I think, frustration from a lot of training partners and that sort of thing. But like, how does that get handled on our side? Because obviously, we have that post access. So if, say, for instance, you've got a course that's running that's on a particular, on a subject, and maybe it's in the last week of it being a live course, do we still have that post access available, or does it just gets cut off?
We do still offer it. We've gotten permission from Microsoft. So the classes that have run still receive their full 180 days of post-class access. So the current official policy from Microsoft is that if a class retires on, I believe, January 1st, learning partners are still allowed to run that course for 90 days afterwards. And then classes that run for those 90 days, the class that ends on that 90th day, they will still get those full 180 days of access. The only thing to be aware of is the courseware material, now that it's all hosted on Microsoft Learn, it may not be available because they may be retiring it. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Make sure you get hard copies, either try and save those web pages locally somehow for your students. There's no easy way right now. But that's just one thing to be aware of, is that, at some point those will go down. So you'll only have the lab steps available and they're just not being maintained anymore.
Okay. And then, so yeah, because that then means that, that then means that there's no, like if there's any issues with the content and on all labs actually running and that's the thing, then there may be some, there may end up being some issues, and particularly as we talked, if there's things that are rapidly changing, there's less likelihood that they're actually going to be maintained and put through, because does the GitHub get locked at that point as well for those sort of courses? I'm actually not aware of what that.
It does. At a certain point, the GitHubs actually get privately archived, so they're no longer visible to anyone. But they stop being monitored by the content owners at a certain point, and so any issues there will just remain. If there's something that we can try and help with, we will via a ticket. But if it's content related, if Azure has made a change, unfortunately, there's just not a lot we're able to do at that point.
Mm-hmm. And actually, so okay, well that's good to know. So I think that's good to know for any of the instructors, like sort of what they can communicate to their students, because certainly in that 180-day period, there may be things that change that the students might come back to an instructor and say, hey, that course we ran 3 months ago, this isn't working anymore. So you've got some information to be able to give to them. Flipping onto that, because onto the other topic you just mentioned was like things like, say, for instance, Azure. What about Azure? Like we're the goal from Microsoft's perspective, long term, from what I understand as an instructor, is to not be using so many of the Azure passes. Therefore, we're trying to get more and more of the courses into the cloud slicing technology, that thing, or putting them onto the platform. How does that add to the wrinkles? Like, what does that add to the challenge of getting things up and running?
So you asked originally, onboarding course, how long it took.
Yeah.
And that's why it was kind of a hard question to answer, because the Azure Pass versions were fairly straightforward to build out, very easy, very quick. The Cloud Slice ones took a lot longer. We had to go in and run them and get what's called a resource scrape, where we get at all the resources and make sure that we can host them on our platform. Now that Microsoft is moving away from Azure passes and moving towards, what they're referring to as ALH hosted subscriptions, so our Cloud Slice, we are working with them to make sure that their new versions of the courses work more seamlessly with Cloud Slice. So we have people who are in communication, on those updates. A big one that's happening soon is DP203, where they're working on releasing a new version that doesn't use an Azure pass and will host it only on the ALH subscriptions. So, we are working with those content owners in conjunction with them to make sure that it's as seamless a transition as possible. So learners can just log in and it'll just be like, the instructions will be different because they'll be updated, but the experience will be, seamless. They'll not have to, redeem an Azure pass, but it'll work well.
And is that the same for, say, for instance, the Microsoft 365 courses, where they would have previously, students would have had to have done gone and created a trial account, which previously was a nice, easy thing to be able to do. But more recently, Microsoft have started requiring things like credit card identification. So is that something that's also in that roadmap to solve?
So I haven't heard anything about the official tenants that they hand out inside of Mock. The credit card has only been affecting the community courseware courses.
Gotcha.
So far. I haven't heard any mention of them moving away from those tenants. I think they're a really powerful tool for teaching the students and how to use everything. So I think those will stay, as far as I understand it. I haven't heard anything about that.
And so if there's those issues or the challenges of having the I guess the lack of an account, because that is something that I think gets lost a little bit from an instructor perspective at times, or not even necessarily from the instructor perspective, because the instructors are generally aware of it, but from a learning partner, like the training centers and the sales folk, they probably aren't are as aware of what's a community course and what's a mock course. So that limitation is a limitation in the community course side of things, but not the mock, or it's not necessarily a limitation, but something that needs to be solved by the community course author.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so if you do, like, as an MCT, if you come across something like that, then that is something that needs to go back to the community course author to be able to say, hey, look, this is now a problem. So because there's not really anything that we can do to solve that problem on our side, really, is there?
Unfortunately not. We've looked into what we're referring to as like M365 cloud slicing, but it's proven to be a little more challenging. We're hoping to have a solution, but it's not as straightforward as cloud slicing Azure has been.
Yeah.
One thing I've heard from an MCT that works is there's a developer account you can sign up for.
Okay.
And on that developer account, you can actually create sub accounts to it and then assign them licenses for your students. So it's a little more manual, but that does bypass the credit card requirement so far, from what I understand.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay. All right, no worries. Okay, anything else, Nathan, that you would like to add? Anything that you want the MCTs of the world or the instructors of the world to know now that you've got your forum?
I mean, you've picked my brain pretty well, I think. I think you're gonna, cover a free MCT access after this, which is kind of the big thing for me.
Yes. Yeah.
Just knowing you can go in and launch all of our labs except for the multi-user tenant ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And the multi-user tenant ones, just to clarify on that, so there are some courses which are only available in the context of a class. And that's by design, and obviously that does give some challenges with regards to getting things like to doing prep and that sort of thing. But it is by design for those particular courses, so they are specially designed around that. So and it's not that like we should clarify that's that's a choice that's been made due to the nature of those particular courses, right? So but I don't think there's very many of those. There's a handful. I think maybe 2 or 3.
I think there's 5 right now.
Oh, there you go. 5. Okay.
Yeah, it's mostly dynamics courses.
Yeah.
Essentially, the tenant is recyclable, so there's only so many of them in circulation for all ALHs to use.
Yeah.
So they can only be provided for a certain amount of time in the context of a class.
And I would guess that a dynamics instructor would probably have their own tenant to be able to do their own prep within anyway. So therefore, the downside or the challenge with that is probably less than what it would be otherwise. So
yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Nathan. I really appreciate your time. I hope that was painless.
Thank you very much. That was great. It was a real pleasure being here.
No problems. All right. So I would ask you to hang around just in case when we get to questions, if there's some questions that you have or that folk might have for you. But let me just unspotlight you. And then I'll bring it back to this is what Nathan was mentioning before, the instructor offers, that we do have some instructor offers that are available for you. Now we mention this every meeting, so therefore if you've listened to some of the recordings or attended in the past, you're like, yeah, we know this, but it's we always have new instructors coming through as well, so it's important to know that these things are available for you. So there's free access to be able to prep for classes and also be able to expand your knowledge. So it's not just limited to the classes that you teach. You can use this to be able to step outside of your lane, as to use that term. And it gives you the ability to be able to use all of our environment. That we have a few different versions of it. We have the mock lab access, so that gives you access to all of the Microsoft official content and be able to launch those labs. And then we also have 2 all access passes. Now this is for our challenge labs, and we've got one set up for MCTs, and we've got one set up for AWS instructors as well. But regardless of which version it is you sign up for, that'll actually give you access to all of the challenge labs. So therefore, that actually gives you all the topics across. So the question from Mundo, the AWS access provided only to certified AWS trainers, or available to MCT. So it's just different entrance points into the same list. So we've got folk who are MCTs, we've got folk who are AWS instructors. We certainly have some that are both. But regardless of which instructor you are, you have access to the same list of more than 1,000 challenge labs. So and also the instructor recognition as well. So that's the badging. You may have seen some of those badges that have come through for for classes and for the number of students that you've impacted and that sort of thing. To sign up for all of those, there is some actions that's required to enable those features. So make sure you do visit skillable.com/offers to be able to sign up for those. You do have to provide us with a little bit of information so that we can then validate who you are and give you access to the either the labs or to the challenge labs. Speaking of challenge labs, Ashley, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you like to just have a quick chat about the challenges and that sort of thing that are coming up on the Skillable challenges?
Why, yes, Kyle, I would love to. Thank you. So Armando, Randy, others that are going to be listening to, again, the recording, thanks for the time. Always excited to talk to you about Challenge Labs. The previous year, 2022, obviously, we expanded, as Kyle just mentioned, over to 1,000 challenges across various topics, technologies. We're going to be continuing down that path for the coming year, in particular, out of the areas, like I say, that we have highlighted here on the roadmap slide. We're going to be focusing a lot on data. And I want to say data obviously is a very broad topic, but we're really going to be delving into some data science and data analytics this year. I'm not going to say Q1 because I feel like that's a little lofty, but we will start again, probably more so towards Q2 and Q3. You will see number of challenges expanding in that area as well. We're also going to be rolling out, I want to say, a new level of challenge or a new experience of a challenge that will let you toggle between some difficulty levels. So again, where we can provide learners with a lot of hints, a lot of guidance, or with some hints and some guidance, but we're going to contain it within the same lab environment itself. So that should be exciting, along with some new scoring reports. Really just I say user friendly, so folks can tell at a quick glance how they did, and we can even drill down and tell them to the areas they need to, like say, focus on a little bit more or try again on. So a lot of changes coming. Stay tuned. Look at the roadmap, and then without a doubt, for this audience in particular, myself, my entire team, we want to hear from you. We know, like say, you are in it day in and day out and want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. Good's always good, but we're really here, like say, we want to fix anything, like say, that may be painful, or again, would even be helpful for you in the classroom. Again, so if there's certain things that are not addressed in certain labs from vendor content, let us know. We are always open, like say, to areas, like say, that challenge us would be a good fit for. So yeah.
And so, actually, on that feedback, if you're getting feedback, how does an instructor give us that feedback? What's their method?
So there's a couple of different methods for you. If you are used to seeing challenge labs in some of your deliveries right now, or quite frankly, even through the All Access Pass that Kyle just mentioned, we have a direct link in every single one of our challenge labs where you can tell us again, hey, it'd be better if you guys could address this particular item in this lab, or hey, this thing's moving a little slow. I mean, it can be anything and everything. We welcome all feedback there as well. We also do have a link, and I've got to find it, I'm sorry, within, I think it's on the website as well, but I'll go through and see if I can find it for you guys. That again, you can just submit a support request as well, but there is one tied specifically to challenges that I'll find and post here momentarily. Again, with your feedback, suggestions, and such there.
And I think that's important, like sort of it, and you've heard that as a theme now from Nathan and from Ashley, like sort of that where like Skillable as a company is really wanting to make sure that we get feedback from the folk that are that are in the trenches, right? That are actually seeing these things in day in and day out. And as I sort of said before, like oftentimes there's content that looks perfect until you get 1,000 eyeballs on it, and then there'll be someone who'll go, well, you missed the comma, or this word was wrong, or the way that this was written is a little bit ambiguous, because everyone sees things in slightly different ways. So yeah, like we're always happy and really appreciate getting any of that feedback. So Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate that able to put you on the spot like that. All right. So I might just jump. We're going to jump into then any questions that you might have. So and that's for any of us that are here. If there's any questions you want to raise, feel free to come off mute. So we've got Randy and Armando have joined us live. I don't know if either of you have any questions that you wanted to bring to the table today. If not, like, no pressure. You don't have to ask questions.
I have a comment.
Sure.
A question. Back to your challenge labs, Ashley. Last year, I was working with two sets of groups of people for about 3.5 months each, and they had challenge labs that they were doing. And they had 2 levels they were doing these. The first, it wasn't like a regular mock where step 1, step 2, click here. They gave steps, but kind of a broad range. And then they had the same lab, but they didn't have access to the previous instructions, which said, go forth and do. And while the go forth and do caused lots of stress, controversy, some interesting conversations, they really enjoyed those. So the more of those that can be done, I think the better off people will be.
Well, thanks, Randy. That is great feedback. It's always that delicate balance I think we try to strike sometimes of just giving folks enough information. You know, one of the mantras we really try to embrace when it comes to challenges is that desirable difficulty or failing fast and failing forward. We want folks to at least give it a whirl, right? Because you'll learn so much more, you know, figuring it out along the way. But to your point, we also don't want to invoke controversy in a classroom. Especially if folks feel like it's a high stakes or, you know, just like I say, we don't want to make them uncomfortable. I think what might be interesting, again, this is even our evolution of a product, but kind of that adaptive or that new challenge lab experience that I talked about. It's almost like we're combining the best of both worlds in there so students can toggle back and forth within that same environment. So if you do, like say, just have a learner that, again, just may not be more advanced or just not as versed in technology, they've kind of got a little bit of that, I don't want to say scapegoat, but they've got a little bit more of a breadcrumb trail versus someone that may want to jump in and again, that does embrace that failing fast, failing forward. And not only can they toggle in between, like say, that experience back and forth during the lab, anytime they want to come back and do it, you know, throwing this out there, as a trainer, you could be saying, you know, as we're going through this, everybody do guided, right? First go around, let's give it a whirl, you know, exactly like say where to go. You've got your safety net here, but then tomorrow or homework or whatever you want to term it as, you can flip over to the advanced mode and just like say, kind of judge a before and after, and, you know, really kind of drive home, look at the stuff, obviously, you obtained, like say, just by learning to do this or so forth. So that's great feedback. I'm so appreciative of you sharing that.
I had an advantage in that it wasn't a regular 4 or 5 day delivery. I had these people for a long period of time. So on a Thursday, we could start, and if they were taking longer than expected, I carried over to Friday or Monday. So we had that flexibility, which you don't have in a regular environment.
Right.
But I have had classes where people have gone through the labs, and then they saw there were challenge labs, and why other people were still struggling with the built-in labs, they hopped to the challenge labs, and they enjoyed those, and
good.
They found it useful for preparation for standardized evaluations that had performance features in it.
Yeah, it's always a handy way to be able to use those as well. You know, getting ready for an exam and what exams might look like. So.
Okay, just want to toss it out.
Thanks
Challenge
again,
lab's
Randy.
good.
Thanks, Randy. Armando, do you have any questions or comments? He's typing.
I just noticed that my microphone is open. Sorry. I'm glad I didn't make any weird noise
Now,
here.
now you're in it.
Well, there was that one time around 15 minutes ago, and I wasn't going to say anything, but
No, but something that just came to me, I was involved with the Open Hack program last year with Microsoft.
Yeah.
And it kind of clicked in my head, how would you compare the challenges, Skill Lab challenges with the Open Hack experience?
so I think it's a different format. And Ashley, do you have a comment?
I honestly, I was just going to put you on the spot and be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about Open Hack? So yeah, you go first.
So
So the Open Hack is like a collection of challenges that they progress. Usually they have 7, 9, and sometimes 10, where there is no instructions on how to accomplish a task, but there are links to documentation where people would research there if they don't know how to do a particular thing, and they implement the solution. And it's a very loose format because you can implement the solution in any way. As long as you get the result, it's fine. But it's also assisted. They ask MCTs to be there to serve as guardrails, but never to give answer to the participants. So that's pretty much what Open Hack is.
Amanda, I've done several Open Hacks as well, and they're very similar to what's being done here, except that is obviously lasting 3 or 4 days versus these, which is individual items that you're working on. Similar type of concept, though.
And I think also the difference is that with an Open Hack, you have a long-term sort of goal, which is where those 3 or 4 days sort of come into. Whereas with the challenge labs, they're more designed to be, I guess, more sort of modularized goals or smaller goals. We probably give more guidance, even in the expert level ones, than say, for instance, you would have in the Open Hacks, because we still have the outcome is still the important part. So it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily matter how you got there, but we probably give a little bit more guidance. We probably act more as those MCT guardrails, but within as a standalone product. So and I guess if you wanted to look at it, if you had all of the, say for instance, if you did one of the learning paths within say for instance the dev one of the dev topics, you would probably have that as being sort of analogous to an Open Hack. But I think the Open Hack is probably far more free form by design than what the challenge labs would be. Would probably be my feedback. So
Gotcha.
I think
Yeah.
Armando, if I could, but just adding to some of Kyle's comments, I do think our expert challenges as they stand today, they're a little bit more modularized and targeted, right? So I don't want to say that they're small, but when you think of it just as far as time-wise, they may last somewhere between 75 to 90 minutes, which obviously different from the Open Hacks. And they are, like I say, a little bit more structured. So again, we may put out a scenario that says, in this scenario, you need to accomplish X, Y, Z, but we do provide, I want to say, a little bit of sequence just as far as, hey, here's the first requirement, here's the second requirement, here's the third requirement. So again, I'll just say kind of your guardrails to go back to that example. One thing that we do have on the drawing board for this year, though, I have what we're going to call, for now, capstone challenges. And what I am envisioning those capstones, just to kind of break it down in terms that we have right now, maybe it's combining 3 or 4 expert challenges. So again, it becomes a much larger, again, just what's the word I want to say? Much larger objective to accomplish. And it can be one of 2 things. There is a part of me that says, hey, we still may want to put our guardrails in on the capstones, just knowing, like I say, right now, our challenge labs, they're also designed to be self-directed. So if we don't have or like say students, learners wouldn't have the luxury of an NCT or someone there to help guide them. We may still put, like say, those guardrails in. However, don't quote me on this. We could perhaps, and we'll noodle on this, take one of those capstones and strip out the instructions, for lack of a better word, or strip out some of the requirements, for better words. So again, we could probably, like say, still outline objectives, but maybe we don't put the pages or the requirements in order. So I'm intrigued by this. And I can think of a couple of different ways that we might be able to get there. I think my question back to both you and Randy, do the open hacks have to be days in length to you? Does that have any bearing?
All the open hack, I mean, I'm not Randy. Okay.
We're
But
holding you to this.
all the open hacks have assisted, actually they call it coached. It'll be at least 3 days. Some are 4.
So same.
I've dealt with 3 days with those.
Yeah,
But
but
at the
again,
time I was working with people who were overseas because it
Right.
worked out schedule wise for me, but I also gave them the option of emailing me outside of their coach time, which was my regular time. So in case they wanted to work later, they could.
yeah,
know
but again, there are 3 or 4 days, but they're comprised by challenges, 6, 7, 10 challenges. And each challenge would take about 2-3 hours. I mean, there is no time limit. You will let people do whatever and as much as they can do. So sometimes, like for the Kubernetes one, there are 10 challenges, and I coached that about, I can't remember, but perhaps 7 times. Only once they made all the 10 challenges
Right.
within the 4 days. So the bottom line is, I think they're designed to be about 4 hours bite size each challenge.
Yeah, I know that at events when we've hosted them at events as well, they've been sort of, because obviously the event is a 3-day event or something like that, then the open hack part of it would be like 3 or 4 hours. So I think it depends on the particular design of the open hack as to which way it's going to be. So.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. Just wondering how it compares. I do have a couple clients coming in requesting training for Azure involving Kubernetes and Synapse and these things. And I think challenges would be a good idea for them. By the way, how do you do with public companies like procurement and these things? Do you have a hub you work? I mean, we're talking that offline. Sorry.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, Amanda, if you want to reach out, we can have a chat offline about that and how that sort of process works and get you talking to the right person.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for your question and feedback, everybody.
Yes, indeed. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over the top of you, Ashley.
And Ashley, you've been recorded, so I will coach you on that, the capstone.
That's right. So we'll just have to make sure that Kristen cuts out the bit that says, "Don't hold me to this," and just take out the "don't." All right. It was at 1 hour and 5 minutes through the recording, Kristen, just so when you get to it. All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap up before it goes a little bit crazy. Thank you very much for Randy and Amanda for attending, and thank you for anyone who's listening to this afterwards. Really appreciate it. Nathan, thank you for giving us your time, to giving us a really good insight into the mock world and the challenges that come along with that. And then, as always, Ashley, thank you for your Challenge Lab insights. It's always good to be able to pick your brain on it. So really appreciate it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next month's meeting. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Nice
Right.
seeing both of you again.
Yeah. Good to speak to you,
too,
Randy.
Randy. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.